made complete. Your dishwasher does the work for you. Temperatures up to 140 degrees. Too hot for hands. Some dishwashers even have pans and tableware at the bottom with plastic and glassware on top.
Funol, the brand I trust.
That's the only way. That's the only way that I think I can process what's going on.
I'm really sad for my community. Everybody has lost everything. I just had so many wonderful times here. And the good news for me is that I still remember those times. The times aren't gone, the memories aren't gone, the house is gone. But the love that was in the house, that's still in me.
To help those affected by the California wildfires, donate today by going to redcross.org/save or call 1-800-RED Cross.
I got one thumbs up. I hope somebody's out there. I don't know if you come on when I was sharing or not. Hold on. Watching The Price is Right at night.
Trip to Mauritius, spa services for a year and a Chevy Trax. You bid $40,000. Actual price,
Yep.
$37,852.
Hey, thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. How's your head? Gotta love The Price is Right at night. They give away all kinds of big shit. $100,000 worth of prizes. That woman won. Another dude won $30,000. Had a chance at $150,000. Price is Right at night is fucking lit. So, how is everybody? Thanks for popping in. Love and appreciate you. How's your head? If you're new, please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. I'll read to you, so I will. I'll get high and read to you, so I will. So, say hello. Hey, there's my dude. How are you, my brother? Where is the last druid? He should be popping in. Thanks for popping in. Love and appreciate you. How's your head? Milan 6 Ramos. Hi. How's it going? Sanji, how's it going? Thanks for popping in. Love and appreciate you. How's your head? Why do I have a devil shirt on? Because, you know, why not? It's a great shirt. A friend of mine in Mississippi does these. He is a mad and crazy printer, and he prints out all kinds of t-shirts. You like that? Isn't that a good one? But he goes by Sean Star Wars on all the social media platforms. So if you get a chance, check him out. He does all kinds of block prints, t-shirts, and whatnot. I'm glad you're good. I am very good. Thanks for coming in. All of those that are new, please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. Hey, there's the last druid. Thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. How's your heads, everybody? Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will read to you. What's going on? Avery Faith. Oh, you poor child. You know so little. But yeah, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. But I'll be reading this tonight to you. We're starting on chapter 2, Callahans Crosstime Saloon. But yeah, thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. How's your heads? Go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's my only commandment for the evening. And then grab your blanket, grab your towel, a pillow, your favorite beverage, and I will toke away and read the story of Callahans Crosstime Saloon. LRDT 20. Hello. Thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. How's your head? My day was pretty good. Let's see, what did I do today? Oh, good for you, Avery. Do you need a cookie? I mean, is that what you're looking for? You want a cookie? You want us to all be proud of you? Yay, everybody, clap for Avery. Yay, Avery. You feel better now. But, so, go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. And you can listen to me read all kinds of subversive things. You don't need either one, children. You don't need either one. Trust me. I've sold my soul to both and then bought them back because they're fake. They're just what somebody made up. And you still do it. Yes, he does. Dude, you can help him find the door. Joey, thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. How's your head? Now, if you're new to the group, anybody that's new, please take the moment to go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. And I will read all kinds of things to you. But tonight, I'm going to be reading from the wonderful book of Callahans, Crosstime, Saloon. And this was written by, dude, I love you, man. This was written in the 70s by an author called Spider Robinson. And it's a pretty good series so far. I kind of like it, to be honest. And I think I might buy a book that has 3 of the books in it all in one. Because this seems to be a pretty good series, or it seems to be turning into a pretty good series. So we shall see. I've only read ahead so far of what I needed for tonight. So what I know of the book, you will hear in just a moment. We are going to pick up on chapter 2, the time traveler. What is our time? Speaking of time traveler, 10:05. Alrighty, kids. Let me get a drink. I should have re-upped that. Oh, that tastes so good. Thank you, dude. I greatly appreciate you, my friend. Let's see, what did I do today? Well, I think I cursed the name of FedEx, and then they delivered. And Sunday, I went to a drag show. Sunday was a wonderful drag show. I had a really good brunch. Now, this is the one in Harrisburg. There's also one in State College that I may go to. The one in Harrisburg, it's $40, and you are supplied the brunch, like the food comes with it. The one in State College, it is $20, but the food isn't included. But there is food there for purchase throughout the thing. So I might have to do the State College one and see what it is. Thank you once again, dude. You know how to do it. The wing nuts are flying high tonight. $86,000 seconds. That's incredible. I love that. You know, I'd ask Alexa how many minutes is in 86,000 seconds, but Alexa is too fucking stupid to know that. I swear to God. And then, you know, I went and got one of those Google Homes just to compare them. And the Google on my phone is smarter than the Google. No. Hey, Ray, you made it. Pokey Day. No, why do you? Should you? I think you probably should. And do you know most of lung cancers are not found in people who've never smoked? Crazy how that works, isn't it? Dude, I love you, man. You are right on it, brother. Boy, the crazies are in force tonight. Ray, thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. We are reading. I don't know if you came in when I said it, but we are reading from Callahans' Crosstime Saloon, and we are on chapter 2 tonight. And it's a pretty good series. And I'm so glad you made it, Ray. I've been wondering how you're doing. That was very cool. You popped that up there, our friendship for 7 years. That's awesome. It's hard to believe it's been 7 years already. Dude, you are on it, brother. You are on it. Wow, I had a brain fart there. Yeah, I know. But, all right, kids, where are we at here? 10:09. All right, we're going to get this started. Thanks for coming in. Love and appreciate you. How's your heads? If you're new to the room, please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would greatly appreciate that. And I'll give it a second here. We'll take a hit off the old vape. I do believe this is rainbow something diamonds. So pretty tasty stuff that we're using tonight. But all right, chapter 2 from Callahans' Crosstime Saloon. Let's see. Where does chapter 2 begin? Do I have a table of contents in this thing? Nope. Not a single one. You know, I guess I probably could have checked this out before I, but, you know. There it is. Chapter 2. Time Traveler. Yep. Let's get a little drink. Callahans' Crosstime Saloon, written by Spider Robinson. Chapter 2. Time Traveler. High school who turned me on to Callahans. Nice, dude. I'm glad you turned me on to him. It seems pretty good so far. All right, chapter 2. The Time Traveler. Of course, we should have been expecting it. I guess the people at Callahans read newspapers just like other folks. And there'd been a discotheque over on Jericho Turnpike hit 3 days earlier. But somehow, none of us was prepared for it when it came. Well, how were we to know? It's not that Callahans' place is so isolated from the world that you never expected to be affected by the same thing. God knows that most of the troubles of the world, old and new, come through the door of Callahans sooner or later. But they usually have a dollar bill in their fist, not a .45 automatic. Besides, he was such a shrimpy-looking guy. And on top of everything, it was Pun Day night. Pun Day night is a weekly attraction at Callahans, if that's the word. Folks who come into the place for the first time on a Tuesday evening have been known to flee screaming into the night, leaving full pitchers of beer behind in their haste to be elsewhere. There's Sunday, see, and then there's Monday, and then there's Pun Day. And on that day, the boys begin assembling around 7:30. And after a time, people stop piddling around with drafts and start lining up pitchers. And Fast Eddie gets up from his beat-up upright piano and starts pulling tables together. Everyone begins, ever so casually, jockeying for position, so important on Pun Day night. Here and there, the newer men can be heard warming up with one another, and the first groans are heard. Say, Fogarty, I hear tell Stacy Keach was engaged to the same girl 3 times. Every time the big day came due, she decided she couldn't stand 'em. Do tell. Yep. Then the late Harry Truman himself advised her, said, Gal, if you can't stand to Keach, get out of the hitchin'. Pun Day. And another 3 or 4 glasses hit the fireplace. Lost my place there for a split second. Of course, the real regulars, the old-timers, they simply sat and drank their beers to conserve their wit. Well, they add little to the shattered welter of glass that grows in the foreplace, though the toast, when they make them, can get pretty flashy. Along about 11, Doc Webster comes waddling in from his rounds, and the place hushes up. The doc suffers his topcoat and bag to be taken from him, collects a beer mug full of Peter Dawson's from Callahan. Alexa, shut the fuck up. Alexa decided to pipe off and takes his place at the head of the assembled tables like a liner coming into port. Then, folding his fingers over his great belly, he addresses the group. What is the topic? At this point, the fate of the evening hangs in the balance. Maybe you'll get a good topic. Maybe you won't. And the only way to explain what I mean is by example. Fast Eddie, says Callahan. How about a little inspirational music? That would bring the problem into scale, says Doc Webster, and the battle is joined. I had already noted that. Comes the hasty report from Shorty Steins, and over on his right, Long Drink McGongle snorts. You've cleft me in twain, he accuses, and Tommy Jansen advises him to take a rest, and by the time that Callahan can point out that this ain't a music hall, it's a bar, they're off and running. Once a topic is established, it goes in rotation clockwise from Doc Webster, and if you can't supply a stinker when your turn comes up, you're out. By 1 o'clock in the morning, it's usually a tight contest between the real pros. All of them acutely aware that anyone still on the list by closing gets his night's tab erased. It has become a point of honor to drink a good deal on Pun Day night to show how confident you are. When I first noticed this and asked Callahan whose idea Pun Day had been in the first place, he told me he couldn't remember. One smart fella, that Callahan. This one night in particular, he had up an awful lot of alcohol and one hell of a lot of spiritual fortitude. The topic was one of those naturals that can be milked for hours. Electricity. It was about 1:15 that the trouble started. By this point in a harrowing evening, the competition was down to Doc, Noah Gonzalez, and me. I was feeling decidedly punchy. I have a feeling this is going to be a good round, Fermi, the doc mused, and I sent a few ounces of scotch past an angelic smile. You've galvanized us all once again, Doc, said Noah immediately. Suck it to me, I agreed enthusiastically. The doc made a face, no great feat considering what he had to work with, and glared at me. Why, you debasing this contest with slang, he intoned. Oh, I don't know, interceded Noah. Seems like an acceptable current usage to me. You see, Doc, I said desperately, beginning to feel the strain now. Noah and I seem to in agreement. But Doc Webster wasn't looking at me. He wasn't even looking in my direction. He was staring fixedly over Noah's right shoulder. I regret to inform you all, he said with the utmost calm, that the gent at the bar is not packing a lightning rod. About 30 heads spun round at once. And sure enough, there was a guy in front of the bar with a .45 automatic in his hand, and Callahan was staring equably into the medicine end. He was holding out a salt shaker in his huge horny fist. What's that for? The gunman demanded. Might as well salt that thing, son. You're about to eat it. Now, your run-of-the-mill stick-up artist would react to a line like that by waving the rod around a little, maybe even picking off the odd bottle behind the bar. This fella just looked more depressed. He didn't look like a stick-up artist, if it came to that. I'd have taken him for an insurance salesman, down on his luck. He was short, slight, and balding, and his gold-rimmed glasses pinched cruelly at his nose. His features were utterly nondescript. A Walter Mitty character of despair. And I couldn't help remembering that some of our more notable assassins have been Walter Mitty types. Then I saw Fast Eddie over at the piano slide his hand down to his boot for the little blackjack he carries for emergencies, and began trying to remember if my insurance was paid up. The scrawny gunman locked eyes with Callahan, holding the cannon steady as a rock, and Callahan smiled. Want a drink to wash it down with? He asked. The guy with the gun ran out of determination all at once and lowered the piece. Looking around him vaguely, Callahan pointed to the fireplace, and the guy nodded thanks. The gun described a lazy arc and landed in the pile of glass with a sound like change rattling in a pocket. You might almost have thought the gun had shattered a window that kept out a storm, but the whooshing sound that followed was really only the noise of a couple dozen guys all exhaling at the same time. Fast Eddie's hand slid back up his leg, and Callahan said softly, "You forgot the toast, friend." I expected that to confuse the guy, but it seemed he knew something about Callahans. Place, after all, because he just nodded and made a toast. To progress. I could see people all up and down the bar firing up their gussers, but nobody opened his trap. We waited to see if the guy felt like telling us what his beef with progress was. And when you understand that, you will have gone a long way toward understanding what Callahan's place is all about. Not very good punctuation in this one. I'm sure anywhere else, folks would figure that a man who just waved a gun around owed him an explanation, if not a few teeth. We just sat there looking non-committal and hoping he'd let it out. He did. I mean, progress is something with no pity and no purpose. It just happens. It chews up all you ever knew and spits out things you can't understand. And the only value it seems to have is to make a few people a lot of money. What the hell is the sense of progress anyway? Keeps the dust off you, said Slippery Joe Mazer seriously. Now Joe, as you know, has 2 wives, and there sure as hell ain't no dust on him. I suppose you're right, said the clerical-looking burglar. But I'd surely appreciate a little dust, just at the moment. I was hip deep in it for years, and I don't know how well off I was. Well, take this to cut it with, said Callahan, and held out a gin and gin. As he handed it over, his other hand came up from behind the bar with a sawed-off shotgun in it. I'll be damned, said Callahan, noticing it for the first time. Forgot I had that in my hand. He put it back under the bar, and the balding bandit swallowed. Now then, brother, pull up a chair and tell us your name, and if you got troubles I never heard before, I'll give you the case of your choice. Make it I.W. Harper. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Harpooch, said Doc Webster, the last rising syllable occasioned by long drink McGongles, size 9s, having come up hard on the Doc's instep. Pretty quick on the uptake, that long drink. My name is Hauptmann, the fellow said, picking up the drink. Thomas Hauptmann. He took a long pull. That is, I used to be a minister. And then God went and died. And now what the hell do you do? Is that? After a long drink with genuine sympathy. Something like that, Hauptmann agreed. He died of malaria in a stinking little cell in a stinking little town in a stinking little banana republic called Pasala, and his name was Mary. Ice cubes clinked against his teeth. Your wife? Asked Callahan after a while. Yes, my wife. No one dies of malaria anymore. Do you know that? I mean, they licked that one years ago. How'd it happen? Doc asked gently. And as Callahan refilled glasses all around, the time traveler told us his story. Mary and I, he said, had a special game we played between ourselves. Oh, all couples play the same game, I suppose, but we knew we were doing it, and we never cheated. You see, as many of you are no doubt aware, it is often difficult for a man and a woman to agree. Sustained audience demonstration signifying hearty agreement. Even a minister and his wife. Almost any given course of action will have two sides. She wants to spend Sunday driving in the country, and he wants to spend it watching the football. People sell razor blades. How is the dilemma resolved? Often by histrionics. At 10 paces, she will emote feverishly of the joys of a country drive, entering rapture as she portrays the heart-stopping beauty to be found along Route 25A at this time of year. He, in turn, will roll his eyes and saw his hands as he attempts to convey through the wholly inadequate vocabulary of word and gesture how crucial this particular game is to both history of football and the scheme of things. And I need to pause for hydration. Cottonmouth. The winner gets, in lieu of an Oscar, his or her own way. Pardon me. It is a fairly reasonable system based on the theory that the pitch of your performance is a function of how important the goal is to you. If you recognize that you're being outacted, you realize how important this one is to your spouse, and you acquiesce. The not cheating comes right there, and not hamming it up just to be the winner. And in admitting you've been topped. That's why when Mary brought God into the argument, a highly unfair, last-ditch gambit for a minister's wife, I gave in and agreed that we would spend my vacation visiting her sister, Karina. I had given up a congregation over in Sawville, not very far from here. Frankly, Mary and I had had all the Long Island we could take. We hadn't even any plans. We intended to take a month's vacation, our first in several years, and then decide where to settle next. I wanted to spend a month with friends in Boulder, Colorado. And Mary wanted to visit her sister in a fly-speck banana republic called Pasala. Corrine was a nurse with the Peace Corps, and they hadn't seen each other for 7 or 8 years. As I said, when a minister's wife begins to tell him about missionary zeal, it is time to capitulate. We said goodbye to my successor, Reverend Davis, promised to send a forwarding address as soon as we had one, and pushed off in the winter of 1963. We divided the voyage between discussing the growing unpleasantness in a place called Vietnam and arguing over whether to ultimately settle on the west or east coast. We both gave uncertain, shaky performances, and the issue was tabled. Meeting Corrine for the first time, I was terribly struck by a dissimilarity of the sisters. Where Mary's hair was a rich, almost chocolate brown, Corrine's was a decidedly vivid red. Where Mary's features were round, Corrine's were square, with pronounced cheekbones. Where Mary was small and soft, Corrine was long and lithe. They were both very, very beautiful. But the only characteristic they shared was a profundity of faith that had nothing to do with heredity, and which went quite as well with Corrine's fiery sense of purpose as with Mary's quiet certainty. Pasala turned out to be a perfect comic opera Central American country, presided over by a small-time tyrant named de Villega. The hospital where Corrine worked was located directly across the Plaza de Palacio from the palace, which gave the square its name. De Villega had built himself an immense mausoleum of an imitation castle from which to rule at about the same time that the hospital was built. With much of the same sources of funding, Pasala, you see, exports maize, sugarcane, a good deal of mahogany, and oil. As Corrine led us past the palace from the harbor, I commented about the number of heavily armed garditos in groups of 5 each, of which had its own commissario, who stood at every point of entry at the huge stone structure, with their rifles at the ready. Corrine told us that revolution was brewing in the hills to the north under the leadership of a man named Miranda, who, with absurd inevitability, had styled himself El Supremo. Mary and I roared with laughter at this final cliché and demanded to be shown someone taking a siesta. Without cracking a smile, Corrine led us around behind the hospital, where 4 mule-drawn carts were filled with khaki figures taking the siesta that never ends. You cannot deal with the problems of Pasala by changing the channel, Tom, she said soberly, and my horror was replaced by both a wave of guilt and wistful, palpable vision of Boulder in the spring, which, of course, only made me feel more guilty. We dined that night in a miserable excuse for a cafe, but the food was tolerable and the music quite good. Considering that the 2 women had not seen each other for years, it was not surprising that the conversation flowed freely, and it kept coming back to El Supremo. I have heard it said that his cause is just, Corrine told us over coffee, and I certainly can't argue otherwise, but the hospital is filled with the byproducts of his cause, and I'm sick of revolution. It's been worse than ever since De Villega. I don't know why my mind is having trouble with that. De Villega had Miranda's brother shot. Good God, how did that come about, I ask. Pablo Miranda used to run this cafe, and he never had a thing to do with revolution. In fact, an awful lot of militant types used to drink in a much more villainous place on the other side of town, rather than embarrass Pablo with their presence. But after El Supremo blew up the armory, De Vallega went a little crazy. A squad of guardios came to the door and cut Pablo in half. Things have been accelerating ever since. People are afraid to travel by night, and De Vallega has his thugs on double shifts. There are rumors that he's bringing in trucks and cannon and a lot of ammunition from the United States for an expedition to clear out the hills, and the American embassy is awfully tight-lipped about it. What kind of a roller is De Vallega? Mary asked. Oh, an absolute thief. He robs the peons dry, rakes off all he can, and I'm sure the country would be better off if he'd never been born. But then, there are some conflicting reports about El Supremo, too. Some say he's a bit of a butcher himself. And of course, he's a communist, although God only knows what that means in Central America these days. I began to reply when we heard an ear-splitting crash from outside the cafe. Glasses danced off tables and shattered, and pandemonium broke loose. 3 men scrambled to the door to see what had happened. As they reached the doorway, a machine gun spoke, blowing all 3 back into the cafe. They lay as they fell, and Mary began to scream. Tom, Corrine shouted, above the din of gunfire and panic-stricken people. We've got to get to the hospital. How do we get out? I yelled back, rising and lifting Mary from her chair. This way. Corrine led us rapidly through the jabbering crowd to a back exit, at which were gathered a good number of people, too frightened to stick their heads out the door. I was inclined to agree with them, but Corrine simply walked out into the night. I glanced at Mary. She returned my gaze serenely, and we followed. There were no sudden barks of gunfire. The revolutionaries were not really interested in anyone within the cafe. They were simply shooting anything that moved back into the plaza. As I helped Mary through the dark streets behind Corrine, I tried to figure the way back to the hospital, but I could not recall where the back door of the cafe lay in relation to the door through which we had entered. But it seemed to me that we would have to cross the plaza. I called to Corrine, and she halted. As I came up to her, a volley of gunfire sounded off to our left, ending in a choking gurgle. Considering what you've told us about Miranda's egregious charm, I said as softly as a heaving chest would let me, had I better get you 2 ladies to the American embassy? It's built like a fort, and it lays on the side of the plaza. The hospital is very short-staffed, Tom, was all Corrine replied, with a total absence of facial expression or gesture. But I knew I could never equal a performance like that in my lifetime of trying. As she spun on her heel and continued to walk, Mary and I exchanged a long look. And she's a rank amateur, I said, shaking my head sadly. She and I used to do summer stock together, she said, and we followed Corrine's disappearing footsteps. Oh. Boy, that was an odd cough there, wasn't it? Crossing the plaza turned out to be no more difficult than juggling poisoned darts. The few who shot at us were terrible marksmen. By the time it was necessary to cross open space, most of the fighting had centralized around the plaza itself, and both sides were in general much too busy to waste good bullets on 3 civilians running in the opposite direction. But as we reached the hospital, I glanced over my shoulder and saw trucks pulling around the corner of the buildings into the plaza, towing cannon behind them. As we reached through white corridors toward the emergency room, I heard the first reports, then nothing. The artillery provided by the U.S. State Department got off exactly 3 rounds. At that point, we later learned, a bearded man appeared on the palace balcony overlooking the carnage in the square and heaved something down into the trampled sward. It was De Vega's head. Sensing the political climate was With credible speed, the uninformed cannoneers worked up a raging cheer, and the revolution was over. But not for us. The maimed and wounded, who continued to be brought in through the night, gave me my first real understanding of the term walking nightmare. And until you have spent a couple of hours collecting random limbs and organs for disposal, I will thank you not to use the term yourself. I had rather naively assumed that the worst would be over when the battle stopped, but that turned out to be the only signal for the rape and plundering and settling of ancient grudges, which got a good deal uglier. I tried to get Mary to take a few hours of sleep, and she tried to get me to do the same. Although we both put on the performance of a lifetime, neither of us would concede defeat. It was about 3 the next afternoon when I heard the scream. I left one of Del Vega's Ruliels to finish sewing up his own arm and sprinted down a crowded hall toward the surgery where Mary and Corinne had been for the past 13 hours. It sounded as though the scream had come from there. It had. As I burst in the door, I saw Mary first, in the impersonally effervescent grip of the largest man I'd ever seen in my life. Then I saw Corinne, struggling with a broad-backed revolutionary who was throttling a uniformed patient on the operating table. The cross bandoliers over his shoulders rose and fell as he strangled, as though he wanted there to be more to it than simply clenching his fingers. Corinne's flailing fist he noticed not at all. She was undoubtedly stronger than I. I wasted no time in tugging at the madman's shoulder. I picked up the nearest heavy object, a water pitcher, I believe, and bounced it off the back of his skull as hard as I could. He sighed and crumpled, and I whirled towards the giant that held my Mary. "You should not have done that, senor," he said in a deep, soft voice. "The man on the bed, he once did a discourtesy to Pedro's wife, a grave discourtesy." "Get out of this room at once," Corinne snapped in her best drill sergeant voice, shaking with rage. The big man shook his head sadly. "I am afraid not, senorita," he rumpled. Hands like shovels tightened around Mary's biceps, and she still had not uttered a sound since I burst in. "Senor," the giant said to me, "you must please put down the pitcher, or I will be forced to do your own wife a small discourtesy." I started. You see, I know who you are, and I would not wish to be discourteous to the wife of a man of God." The gorilla on the floor began to stir, and the huge man sighed. "I am afraid it is all over for you, Padre. Pedro, he is a most unreasonable man when he feels his honor is at stake. You hit him from behind." Corinne snarled and leapt at him, and I followed suit. Even together we could not budge him on or his iron grip, but we kept him too busy to hurt Mary, and I think we might eventually have prevailed. But suddenly something large and heavy smashed into my left kidney, and I fell to the floor gasping with pain. Through the haze I saw Pedro, his tangled hair soaked with blood on the side, step over me and reach for Mary, and my soul died in my chest. Then my ears rang with a shot, and I twisted about on the floor to see a tall man with a bristling mustache framed in the doorway, a smoking automatic in his hand. He wore the shapeless khakis of the mountains, and there was an easy arrogance in the smile with which he regarded all of us. Behind me there was thud as a body hit the floor. Half blind with pain, I contrived to roll over again and saw that the pistol shot had taken off the top of Pedro's skull. "There is that about martial law," said the man in the doorway with sardonic amusement. "It is addictive." I finally managed to sit up, bracing myself against the large oxygen bottle. "Who are you?" I managed. The lean mustached man bowed low. "Permit me to introduce myself, Padre. I am El Supremo y El Estremio, Senor Manuel Concepcion de Miranda." What a fucking name. "The current ruler of this republic. You, in turn, are the Reverend Hamptman, and I must assume that the charming lady there, release her at once, Diego, is your wife Mary." His excellent English bespoke an unusual degree of education, and his bearing was a studied claim to nobility. I began to believe that we three might survive the afternoon for the first time in what seemed like hours. "How do you all seem to know who we are?" I asked. "Well, we only arrived yesterday, and I don't think we've spoken to more than a handful of Pasalans. Yet that monster over there knew us, and I'm sure I'd remember him. I know all about the comings and goings of all American nationals in Pasala," he said smugly. "Your country has been a source of much inconvenience to me, and I am a thorough man. Are as my lieutenants. Diego is one. Pedro was another. I cannot abide by a lieutenant who loses his head." He holstered his gun and entered the room, and I struggled to my feet with Mary's help. We clung together, and she trembled violently. El Supremo looked about, failed to find a place to sit. He strode to the operating table, shoved the wounded and unconscious soldier off onto the hard floor quite casually, and sat down with his legs dangled over the edge. Corrine went for him, but before she covered 3 feet, the giant Diego intercepted her and lifted her clean up off her feet. She struck at his face with balled fist, but he appeared not to notice. She was sobbing with rage. "Diego," said Miranda with a grin, "since you do not seem to be content unless you have a woman in your hands, why don't you take the young lady to my apartments and keep her there until I come, eh?" Mary and I both cried out. "My friends," said Miranda, still grinning, "this is only justice. I had a woman, Rosa, and she was heart of my heart. She was killed last night by an American cannon shell. Because of your country, I have no woman. It seems only fair that America give me a woman. I prefer an unmarried woman. And I do not think the sister of a minister's wife will disappoint me." He laughed, a gay laugh that froze my blood. "There is that about martial law," I heard myself say. "It is selective." "Explain," El Supremo barked. "I believe the man on the floor over there was shot for attempted rape," I said quietly. "Padre," said the tall revolutionary, drawing his gun again, "in the absence of a lawful constitution for Pasala, I must do the best I can myself. Occasionally, I may be inconsistent, as I am now in sentencing you and your wife to 10 years imprisonment for disturbing the peace. But you will find that there is this about martial law: it is effective." The next 20 minutes were the last free minutes I would spend for 10 years, and the last free minutes of Mary's life. But I don't remember one of them. El Supremo marched us at gunpoint across the plaza to the palace, down many flights of stairs to the lowest of the 3 basement floors which made up the palace's dungeons. There he locked us personally into a 9-by-12 stone cell and left. We were there for 9 years, and I will not speak of those years. After Mary died, I was alone there for 11 months longer, and I will not think of those months. I will only say that in the first weeks I thanked God for giving Miranda the spark of humanity which caused him to put both Mary and me in the same cell. But soon, as I began to see the subtlety and horror of his true intent, I came to curse him with a black hatred. 10 years inside a stone cube with no heat, no ventilation, and a pail for a toilet can do much to a marriage. And that Mary and I survived as long as we did was, I assure you, due only to the depth and strength of her character. And even she couldn't keep me from losing my faith in God. Pause for hydration. And medication. Ooh. The minister was silent, staring into his glass as though he read there a strange and terrible secret which he could not quite believe. The stillness was absolute. No flames danced in the fireplace. I caught Doc Webster's eye, and he seemed to come back from somewhere else with a start. "What happened to Corrine?" he asked hoarsely. Hauptmann put down his glass suddenly and looked round at us incuriously. "I've been told she died that night," he said conversationally. "I rather hope it's true. Miranda was an animal." "Couldn't the American embassy do anything to get you out?" asked Long Drink quickly. And I saw Callahan nod approval. "The American embassy," replied Hauptmann bitterly, "never had the slightest knowledge of our incarceration, nor cared to know. If anyone at all was aware of our presence in Pasala, he must have assumed we had been killed in an uprising. And he undoubtedly heaved a great sea. That wasn't right. He undoubtedly heaved a great sigh when he realized he had no idea who to send condolences to. His words came like machine gun bullets now. We were listed in the prison's records as Hidalgo, Tomasio, and Maria, subversives, and that was quite good enough for the State Department. If they checked at all, El Supremo was quite an embarrassment to the United States, and when they had him assassinated 2 years later, the puppet presidentes they installed were far too busy entertaining American oil executives to be bothered inspecting the palace dungeons. The only human we saw for 9 years was a perpetually drunken jailer who brought such of our food as he didn't eat himself. I'd be there now, except that when Mary died, He broke off, got a fresh grip on himself, and continued. Someone noticed her body being removed for burial and became curious as to why Maria Hidalgo looked like an American. It was a year before I was released, owing to, let me see now, political complications of an extremely delicate nature in the Middle East, I think they said. My God, I just realized what they meant. It sounded insane at the time, and I hadn't thought about it since. He laughed bitterly. Well, what do you know? Anyway, for the last 6 months, I was there. I had Red Cross food and a blanket. So that was hunky-dory. Turned out there was a man from Baltimore, 4 cells down, part of the hospital staff. And he was released too. If Mary hadn't died, we'd both still be there. The minister laughed again, gulped down the rest of his gin, and made a face. She was always getting me out of scrapes. More gin appeared before him. He gulped it noisily. You know, he said with a dangerous high note in his voice, in all the 9 years, the prayers never stopped. Rising from that filthy little cell. For the first 3 years, we prayed that someone would depose El Supremo. For approximately For approximately the next 3 years, Mary prayed constantly that my faith in God would return. Then, for about a year, I prayed to, I don't know who, that Mary would live. And after malaria took her, I spent my time praying to anyone who would listen for a chance to kill El Supremo with my own hands. I mean to say, isn't it ironic? All that prayer, and none of it did the slightest good. El Supremo was dead all the time. I never seemed to get that belief back. And Mary... He broke off short and began to laugh softly. A laugh that got shriller and shriller until the glass burst in his hand. He then just sat and looked at his bleeding palm until Doc Webster came over and gently took it away from him. Well, at least this damn thing is disinfected, said the doc. Don't ever pull that with an empty glass. Someone fetched his battered black bag and he began applying a dressing. Along about that point, everyone in the place got real interested in the floor or the ceiling. It somehow didn't seem as though there was a single intelligent thing that could be said. And it was slowly becoming necessary that somebody say something. Callahan was right there. Reverend, he rumbled, hooking a thumb in his belt. That's a right sad story. I've heard an awful lot of blues, and I can't say I've ever heard worse. But what I would like to have explained to me is how, if you follow me, the hell does all this bring you into my joint with a heater in your fist? There was steel in his voice, and the minister looked up sharply, guilt replacing the agony of his features. Bravo, Callahan, I thought. See, I knew what the preacher couldn't, that when there's an anger in Callahan's voice, it's just got to be theatrics. Because when Callahan is good and truly pissed off, he don't bother to talk at all. The little minister was a while finding words. You see, he said finally, as the doc finished bandaging his hand, it was 10 years. 10 years. I don't know if you can understand what I mean. I know it's been 2 years since Mary died. It's not just that. But you see, she was all I know for such a long time. And now, I don't know anything at all. You must understand, in all that time, we never saw a newspaper or a magazine or a TV. Never heard so much as a radio. We had utterly no communication with the outside world. We were as isolated as two human beings can be. Hell, said Tommy Jansen. That sounds like what I could use to straighten out my head once and for all. I was thinking about a Theodore Sturgeon story called And Now the News. And I kind of agreed with Tommy, which shows how well I'd read this story. Straighten your head out, Hampton exploded. Now, you know perfectly well what the boy means, Long Drink interceded. No one is saying those years weren't nightmares for you. But you know, there were nothing to write home to Mother about for us. You missed a lot of turmoil and a lot of bad times and trouble. And maybe, in that at least, you were better off. I know most of us here have probably wished we could get away from everything for a long spell. And you did it. What's wrong with isolation? Nothing per se, Hampton said quietly. The problem is this. The world won't wait for you. You drop out for more than a short time, and brother, the world goes on without you. I think, said Callahan slowly, I begin to see what you mean. You don't even begin, Hampton said flatly. You can't. You're too close to it. The whole world turns upside down in 10 years, but you turn upside down with it. And so, to you, it's right side up. It all happens over days and weeks and months, and most people can adapt that fast. But I don't recognize the first thing about this world. I didn't live through it. Let me give you all good people a history lesson. He got up, walked to the bar, and put out his hand. Callahan put a glass of gin in it. He turned, faced us all, took a long swallow, and cleared his throat pedantically. Mary and I left for Pasala in February of 1963, he said. I've since had occasion to supplement my own memories with references from the New York Times, and you may find some of them very interesting. On the day of our departure, for instance, there had been a total of 33 Americans killed in Vietnam since the start of U.S. involvement. Not that anyone was aware of it. It wasn't until a few days after we left that Senator Mansfield's study group issued a warning that the Vietnam struggle was becoming an American war. That cannot be justified by present U.S. security interest in the area. Why the godforsaken place was costing us a whole $400 million a year. Of course, General O'Donnell replied the next day that all those combat pilots among the advisors were there to train the Vietnamese, not to take part in the war themselves. A lot happened since then, hasn't it? How about another area, my friends? In November of 1962, Dean Marano of Harvard University warned undergraduates against the use of the stimulant LSD that depresses the mind, and censured Professors Alpert and Leary for promoting its use. Dr. Leary replied that hysteria could only hamper research, and pointed to the absence of any evidence that the drug was harmful. In California, meanwhile, authorities were surrounding a similar warning note concerning a newly discovered drug which was beginning to appear on the streets. It was called methadone. The New American Church was still fighting unsuccessfully for the right to continue using peyote in the religious ceremonies, a practice which predated white settlement in America. Harry Anslinger had just retired as head of the Federal Narcotics Agency, and there was some talk of controlling the sale of airplane glue to those under 18. Incidentally, while Leary and Alpert, who I understand calls himself Ram Dass lately, found little difficulty in preserving their academic autonomy, others were not so lucky. Professor Koch, who was fired from Illinois University for daring to suggest in print that premarital sexual relations should in some cases be condoned. By the time Mary and I got on the boat, the efforts of the American University Professors Association to have him reinstated had been entirely fruitless. A month after we left, the Illinois Supreme Court declined to intervene. Whatever Masters and Johnson were doing, they weren't talking about it. The sexual revolution was still being vigorously and apparently successfully ignored. Hard to remember back 10 years, isn't it? How about the space race? The latest news I've heard puts us quite a few moon landings and space probes ahead of the Russians, and most people I've spoken to seem to assume it was always that way. America has felt pretty cocky about the big deep for quite a while now. Did you know that by February of 1963, the Russian Vostok series had racked up 130 orbits, a total of 192 hours in space, while the U.S. had a total of 12 orbits and 20 hours. A couple of years earlier, President Kennedy, remember him, had publicly committed us to putting a man on the moon in the next decade, and he was widely pronounced deranged. 8 years later, Armstrong took the first lunar walk, and the nation yawned. Oh, you people are so damned blasé about it all. I could go on for hours. When I dropped out, Assassination had not yet become commonplace. JFK had not yet been canonized, and RFK was just arguing his first case in any court as Attorney General of the United States. Cinerama was just getting started, hailed as the wave of the future, and the New York World's Fair had not yet opened. 2 months after we left, Cleopatra premiered, and 20th Century Fox stock dropped $2 a share. Hauptmann broke off, began to laugh hysterically. Callahan reached across the bar and gripped his shoulder with a hand like a stake. But the minister shook his head. "I'm all right," he managed, choking with laughter. "It's just that I haven't told you the funniest joke of all. Nearly killed me at the time, and I didn't dare break up. You see, when I was finally released, they brought me directly to Washington, where some very cheerless men wanted to ask me a number of questions and help me memorize what had officially happened. But first, they decided to compensate me for my troubles with the thrill of a lifetime. I was conveyed before the President of the United States for a hearty hand clasp, and I thought I was going to faint from holding in the laughter. I hadn't thought to ask who the President was. You see, it didn't seem especially important. After all I'd been through, and I didn't expect I'd recognize the name. But when Richard Nixon held out his hand, I thought I'd die. You see, 3 months before I left, Nixon lost the race for governor of California and assured the press with tears in his eyes that they wouldn't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. This time, the whole place broke up, and Doc Webster almost lost his tonsils trying to whoop and swallow at the same time. Fast Eddie tried to swing into "Don't make promises you can't keep," but he was laughing so hard he couldn't find the keys, and a barrage of glasses hit the fireplace from all around the room. What's our time, kids? $11:04. Okay, that's where we're stopping. That's a good point to stop, too. So, time traveler. Man, what a fucking situation that would be. Holy shit. To go visit your wife's sister in a third world country down south and have a revolution break out the second day you're there, and you become prisoner, you and your wife, for 10 years. That would be crazy. What a crazy life that would be. Man, the things that come into Callahans. Holy shit. So, that's a good read so far. I actually went 2 pages further than what I actually had read up earlier. So, but that's interesting. I'm looking forward to finding out what more the ex-preacher has to say. So I am. And you know what? I had told a friend of mine that lives here, William Dolp. He comments on my videos on my YouTube channel. But he went to the drag show with his son, the drag brunch Sunday. That was his first drag show. 70-year-old gay man, and he'd never been to a drag show. Couldn't believe it. But he loved it. Anyhow, he listens to my videos, my YouTube channel, and I told him, I said, you know what, I'm going to try and put up a new video, the new video this week, and it is the origin of religions one. And I never thought about it till Sunday evening when I was going to sit down and start doing it. My voice was gone because I leave it all on the table at the drag show. I hoot, holler, scream at the top of my lungs for the ladies. And it's a good time, but my voice is gone for the next 2 days afterwards. So hopefully tomorrow I will be putting on a new YouTube or a new Little Blue book. I am like mumbling. I can hear it in my speech. And the next one coming up is The Origin of Religion. Little Blue book number 1008. But look at it. I've read the book once and the cover is completely off. It's completely fallen off. And I went to open it yesterday, I think it was. And the pages are starting to come out of it. So, but this one will be up on the YouTube channel. The Origin of Religion, written by Joseph McCabe. Copyright 1926, I think this one is. Yep, copyright 1926. So this one will be up in the next few days. And then the one after that, where did it go? And then the one after that will be The World's Great Religions. And that is Little Blue book number 1030, also written by Joseph McCabe. I am probably going to be doing all the Joseph McCabe books that I have. And there is quite a list of them. So there is the list of all the Joseph McCabe Little Blue books. And I will probably be doing all of them here. So that is what it's pushing 100 years old. Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah, a lot of these books are pushing 100 years old. Which, yeah, kind of explains why it's a little bit brittle. But yeah, that's what's been going on. So, and I've been playing Diablo 4, and that's been taking up some time. But all right, guys, I'm going to jump off here. Thanks for coming in and listening to me read Callahans Crosstime Saloon. And join me next Wednesday, and we'll do it again. We'll read some more and find out a little more about the time traveler. What a life. All right, guys. Love you. Peace out with sauerkraut.